So our first speaker this morning is David Peshkin. And David joined Applied Pavement Technology in 1996. Today, he's the chief engineer and principal.
Thank you, Nicole, and good morning, everyone. My presentation this morning is on pavement preservation for high traffic volume roadways, and it's really focusing on work that's been taking place, was completed earlier this year, but started sometime around 2008 or so on pavement preservation guidelines for high traffic volume roadways. So I'm going to focus on a few specific aspects of this and bring you through some of the background on the project. I'd like to start with the early years of R26, and that's the development of the research report and guidelines. So the project was completed, the original study was completed in 2011. And under that study, we developed a guidelines document and a report. These are shown here. I'll be giving you links in a couple places in the presentation, starting here. Products of the original research study can be found through TRB, among other places. And probably the document of greatest interest is the guidelines document that talks about different preservation treatments and how they can be used on high volume roads. The genesis of this project was the idea that pavement preservation was being increasingly used around the country, but perhaps it was thought of more as a treatment for lower volume roads, while at the same time, some agencies were being quite forward thinking and using it on higher volume roads. In this study, we collected information from agency practices around the country and documented some of those practices where they were using treatments, say for example, chip seals that you might associate with a low volume road. They were using these on roads of 10,000 ADT, say was a typical practice in Texas, up to 30,000 ADT, which was some experience from Washington State, and so on. So we documented what agencies were doing and took that documentation and put it into these guidelines. I would say that while throughout this study we focused on high volume roads, I'd say over time this has morphed more into just pavement preservation. So you will find information about using treatments on higher volume roads, but there's nothing in there that keeps you from applying the same sort of guidance to the use of preservation on lower volume roads. As I said at the time, so from 2008 approximately to 2011, in this study we documented the state of the practice. It wasn't meant to be, here's some innovations that you might try, good luck, if they fail, it's not our fault kind of approach. We were documenting successful practices that agencies had implemented. We took all of this information and put it into some, when we talk about guidelines, what I mean by that is some matrices, some decision trees that could be used to select treatments and select projects, going through a sort of step-by-step process. So I want to show that to you in the next set of slides. Maybe at this point also introduce a caveat. I made a vow a couple years ago in a presentation to never include a slide which was prefaced with the comment, "I know you can't read this." And Judy was there. I think I've probably been about 85% good on that. I'm about to violate that wholesale in this presentation. Hopefully you'll forgive me before the end. I know there's nothing worse than a presenter showing you a bunch of slides with the asterisk, "I know you can't read this," because the point is, why show it? I said we had decision trees and decision tables. This is an outline of the formal process that probably mirrors a lot of informal processes that you go through to select treatments and to select projects. And the first steps above that red line where it says decision, you're looking at evaluating projects and looking at conditions and saying, is this a good candidate for pavement preservation? In the second part of the decision process, if you have identified that a pavement's a good candidate for pavement preservation, the next steps would be to look at what treatments are available and whether those treatments meet your needs for maintaining condition or improving condition, and then going through a process where you select the best alternative from among the feasible alternatives. This was a key part outlining the steps that you would go through. The guidelines document explains in much greater detail what you would be considering in each of these stages. From that, we developed feasibility matrices for asphalt and concrete pavements. These matrices or tables have these various components, and I'm going to explain them here because in the next slide I know you won't be able to read it. These tables relate various conditions, pavement ages, and surface characteristics that you might note on a pavement project to available treatments and make recommendations for those combinations of conditions and treatments which state that treatment is highly recommended for those conditions, generally recommended, provisionally recommended provided that other conditions are met, or recommended that you not use it at all. So what does that look like? Here's a feasibility matrix for asphalt pavements, and I've already warned you across the top is conditions, ages, various ratings, and down the left-hand side is preservation treatments. And then each of those cells, those little circles that you can't read, say whether that combination of distress and treatment is appropriate. So that's where you see the highly recommended, provisionally recommended, probably not recommended, or absolutely not recommended. And we developed these for both asphalt surface pavements and concrete surface pavements. And again, I'd remind you that these were developed based on agency practice and experience, information that was in the literature and not sort of speculative, there's a new treatment out there, we think it could be used for this application. It was really meant to document what people were already doing. So that's the initial research. That brings us up to 2011. This was done as part of the SHARP 2 research program. And as that program was nearing an end, the states through AASHTO, the directors got together and voted on all of the different SHARP projects that they wanted to see moved forward. And this was one of the projects, among many others, that was recommended for further implementation. You may or may not be familiar, there were at least 7 rounds of SHARP 2 implementation, and this project went forward in the first round of implementation. And in that first round, which took place, I may have the dates wrong, but it certainly started around 2013, and I think our first round activities went to 2017. For this particular project, FHWA funding supported 14 agencies. 13 of them received money to place treatments, preservation treatments on high volume roads that they would then monitor. One agency, Minnesota, hosted a workshop and then including a visit to some of their preservation activities at Min Road. I think there were about 160 people that attended that, and that was a great opportunity to get the word out for people to share their experiences. Also under the round 1 implementation, we conducted 4 workshops, 1 showcase, which Ed Naris, who's floating around Illinois somewhere, Ed Naris from Massachusetts, hosted, and then peer exchanges at 4 different states. The implementation activities were really about getting the word out, increasing the knowledge and familiarity with the SHARP 2 tools, and the people up above spoke about reaching a critical mass on implementation, where you might get 35 agencies thinking more about these different tools and adopting them, and really sort of getting past the tipping point where more and more agencies thought of pavement preservation as a normal process. And in our case, thought of pavement preservation on high volume roads as a normal process. In addition to the agencies getting the funding, some of the additional round one accomplishments included the development of a data collection guidelines document, an implementation guide to accompany the other information, and then the development of 3 case studies from among those 14 agencies that documented some of the successes in implementing pavement preservation on high volume roads. So all of that information is available from the SHARP2 website that AASHTO maintains. Link is shown here, so it will be in the presentations that are made available to you. You can also easily get to it by Googling SHARP2 R26, and it will also take you there. So that was round one. The feds came up with some more money, so this project resurfaced in round 7 of implementation to further the implementation of some of these concepts of pavement preservation on high volume roadways. So in round 7 funding, 3 agencies were selected. They're identified here. They did not get money to build test sections. Round 7 implementation focused more on outreach, both externally and internally within the agency. The purpose of the round 7 funding was to provide training and technical assistance to those agencies, whether they wanted it or not. Some of them actually wanted it. And also a more national objective to continue to promote awareness of pavement preservation. There were a few other deliverables that I'll talk about as well. These are the products of the round 7 implementation, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, effectively ended earlier this year, so it's still sort of fresh. One is the R26 tool, which I'm going to show you next. Another is what was referred to as an academic workshop. I'm not really sure why, because no academics were involved. There you have it. That's what it was called. And then just-in-time training, which is sort of what I consider the highlight of our round 7 activities, and which I'll be showing you at the end of this presentation. I do want to mention some of the round 7 staff. We had a lot of different people from inside our company, but one of the key partners in putting together the just-in-time training is a firm called Pavia Systems out of Seattle, Washington, and they really did a bang-up job, in my opinion, of assembling these training tools. The first thing that we did was put together what we might call the R26 tool. If you've ever been into the guidelines document, it's a little report that takes that flow chart, that decision tree, and that guidance, those matrices, and gives you a lot of surrounding information for how to select preservation projects and preservation treatments. A lot of explanation is built into that. We thought that we could put together that same content into a tool. In this case, it's a Visual Basic programmed Excel spreadsheet that accomplishes the same thing. So we know that many people don't like to pick up reports. If they pick them up, they don't like to read them, and if they read them, they promptly forget it. So here's a tool that can be used to, on your desktop, laptop, wherever, to access some of the same information. I could then, violate another rule, which is never try and demonstrate a software program in a presentation. I chose not to do that, but I'm really coming very close to doing it in that I took some screenshots to show you sort of how it's outlined. For agencies, one of the problems with using this tool is that you have to be able to allow macros to operate in your system, and most system administrators at public agencies don't allow files with macros, so you need special permission. But if you get past that, this tool automates all the steps that are in that decision process. There are four main parts to it. The last one I'm not going to talk about, which is links to other resources, but I will show you a little bit about the other three parts. The first set of information that you input into this is performance measures. So this is available for flexible and rigid surface pavements. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, it says flexible. This is effectively the top row of that matrix. So what condition information do you have available? We don't presume that everybody has the same information or uses the same rating system. This allows you to say, here's our rating system, here are the conditions, age, other factors that we use in our decision making. There are some programmed in there. I believe you can add some others. In this example, we are including every possible measure with the check mark on the right side, but you might have one or two, you might have four, you might have 10. All of that is possible. The second set of information that you would enter into this tool is the types of treatments that you would use. Well, this is a section selection. So this is more a project level tool than a network level tool. So we really are looking at specific information about a road. So this would be project by project. This is a sample asphalt surface project, various background information added here. You could set up in your library as many of these as you wanted that you might use to modify for other analyses. Here's the treatments. Again, we tried to incorporate as many treatments as possible. You'll see a bunch listed there. You can add additional treatments. The Excel spreadsheet doesn't know anything about these treatments, how long they last, what they do to the condition of a road when applied. They don't have any extra knowledge. You pretty much have to tell it everything about that treatment. You can add others if they become part of your toolbox. But for each of the treatments that you're considering, you would say how long does it last and what it cost. Again, then at the bottom, one of the things that you can't read is it says, what's the threshold PCI for rehabilitation? That's the point where it stops using preservation treatments and says that it's no longer feasible. Your toolbox could be represented here either with available treatments or other treatments that aren't shown in the tool that you're using in your agency. The analysis section is very long and goes through all of the steps of evaluating for the existing conditions of your pavement and the capabilities of the treatments that you've entered. That analysis goes through whether the treatments that you use are feasible, what they do to performance. It goes through it's got a life cycle analysis that can be done using annual cost or benefit cost analysis. So it's incredibly detailed. It starts with determining whether you want to do both project selection, determining whether the project you're looking at is a candidate for pavement preservation, and treatment selection or just treatment selection. The next umpteen screenshots are not included because we might never finish. All of this is to say we've got the report with the guidelines. If you don't like that, we've got the Excel spreadsheet with that same content, semi-automated. It takes a little while to set up, but once you set it up for the roads you look at, you might be able to use it over and over again fairly simply. One of the key parts beyond the development of that tool was the development of just-in-time training. And that's what I'm going to finish up talking about. The just-in-time training was developed in collaboration with the three participating agencies and then our friends at Pavia Systems. The concept is that different agencies have different training needs, whether it's in the home office or in the districts, at the management level, in the field, at the inspector level or equipment operators. Agencies may have a really broad need for preservation training, and there isn't always training at all of those levels available. when you want to have it. When we talked to the round 7 agencies, we heard concerns like, we get 25% of our staff is new every year, and we're losing all of our experience, and our new staff have no idea what preservation is or what these treatments do. In Washington, we heard, we're so strapped, our maintenance staff, they do preservation from May to September, but after that they're doing snow removal, and in the spring they're doing brush pickup, and when they start preservation again, they've forgotten completely what they did last year. They need to know where to start. We heard that we know our staff needs training, but we don't have time to deliver it, and it's costly to bring people to a central location. We also heard that they really, for the most part, the people who need training know what they're doing. They just need a little reminder, a little push, if you will, to sort of get back in the swing of things. We had a lot of discussions about the target audience, and we heard from different agencies that they had different targets. So one of the challenges that we had was developing content that would be available for a number of different target audiences. That was sort of the background. What we were trying to accomplish in putting together the just-in-time training was to meet the agency's objectives, to meet their needs, to develop a product that would be accessible from any platform, from a smartphone, from a tablet, from a desktop, anywhere at any time, to cover the topics that were selected, brief segments of information, to make something, to recognize the background of the potential learners. They don't have time to sit in a classroom. We need training that's interactive. We need knowledge checks. You might think of that as a mini test. We don't like to use the word test, so we come up with this expression, a knowledge check, to develop knowledge checks, but not in an environment where you're being scored or graded. It's just you checking, did I capture the right concepts properly, or do I need to go back and look at it? We intended to develop this content that could support both the lead agencies, West Virginia, Washington, and New Jersey, as well as a broader audience. So those agencies had interest in developing content that was specifically for them. We understood that, but we also wanted to make sure that we weren't saying something so focused on New Jersey that anybody else would be uninterested in using it. And we wanted a product that could be customized. So I'll show you all of the content that we developed, but for an agency that wasn't interested in all those topics, we wanted something that they could streamline and make a subset of those available. The product is complete. It's been implemented. It is available through AASHTO. I'll show you where. As I mentioned, agencies can create their own catalog as a subset of these, as well as customize the content. I just want to mention a word about the development process. We did most of them. Washington State developed a few of these on their own, and the process was develop a storyboard, sort of in PowerPoint, a screen by screen of the big picture, what's being covered, send it to the agency for review, develop the PowerPoint, send it to the agency review, develop a draft of the implementation product, send it to the agency for review, and then continue ad infinitum or ad nauseum. We went through so many review processes that hopefully we've about got it right. These are the topics. There are 19 different modules or lessons. They're divided into a first section, which is an overview, which doesn't cover any specific treatment. You'll see in parentheses at the end of these is the agency that stood up as the lead agency on each of these topics. This group of topics is more based on is preservation right and project selection and treatment selection. The second group, by far the largest group of topics, is asphalt surface pavements. You can see the different treatments that were covered. Again, this was based on what the agencies were interested in. If you look at this list in any detail, you'll see there are a lot of treatments that aren't included. We just didn't have the time or the funding to cover every preservation treatment, but we tried to cover those treatments that were of interest to these agencies. So the other thing I want to point out is that the asphalt surface pavements and the concrete surface pavements begin with a pavement distress identification module. And this is one that I'm particularly pleased with because it's a topic that we do a lot of internal training of our staff, how to evaluate pavements. And we ended up putting together a product that I think is useful. It's not based on any specific rating system. It's not specifically the PCI, it's not PASER, it's not LTPP, distress identification, but it's sort of a combination of all those things. Here are pavement distresses. Here's a way to identify what you have, and that then ties into a lot of the information about whether treatment is appropriate. So those are the asphalt treatments. Hopefully Larry's not looking closely at the concrete treatments. We did not cover a lot of concrete treatments. Fortunately, the concrete industry has a lot of their own treatment training. We covered a few of them, and again, we have a concrete pavement distress identification module, an overview of concrete pavement preservation that does cover the broader field, and then one sort of topic, treatment-specific lesson that looks at partial depth and full depth repair of concrete. Here's where they are, and if you've got a smartphone or a tablet, I encourage you to look at this now. I do want to see if I can get to the link and show you just a little bit of what this looks like. So again, if you don't want to track it this way, I think you can do Sharp 2 R26. I know you can type in Sharp 2 R26 just-in-time training and get to this point. So this is the just-in-time training. You can see all those topics lined up here. I'm going to just show you a few. I'm going to show you one treatment. So any requests from the audience? Crack prep. Again, if you're following along, you can get to any of these from your handheld. So the idea would be you're an inspector, you're going out on a crack sealing job for the first time this year. You want a refresher, you could access this from your phone in your vehicle. You could look at it at home the night before. It's a very simple combination of short lessons. It's got some audio content. I'm not sure why, because the audio content pretty much reads the content on the slide. Some of the pictures have information behind them, so that's the interactive part. So we've got information about different types of cracks. We've got some videos that are worked in. When is a crack appropriate for crack filling and sealing? When is it not appropriate? Some of the techniques, the equipment. This is an area where you might say, so some of this information in particular is from Washington State. You might say, we don't use a wire brush, or we don't burn our weeds. We use a different technique, or we don't, by the time we get to this preparation, we're doing something completely different, like we route all our cracks and so forth. So this is an example of where you might customize what was provided either for a specific agency or for a national message that you don't feel is appropriate to give you something that is more appropriate for you. And then at the end of this one, there's a little test. So there's some pictures, and it asks what you should do. And let's say, we decided this is a candidate for crack sealing, and it will tell us that's incorrect. There are a number of, this is the self-test. It will let you go on and skip. And each of the, I think almost all of the lessons has this sort of knowledge check incorporated as part of it. That's the just-in-time training. So again, that's where the lessons are. I think this addresses some of the issues shown here. So, we've heard that preservation training is a need at all different levels. I encourage you to think about what your specific needs are, what the content should be, who the audience is. Do you have different audiences, not just one? What resources are available to meet that need? What time and funding do you have to meet that need? Do you have available training materials? Do you customize training? Or are you kicking the can down the road and plan to get this at some further point? And I'd say that there are, I don't know, not a broad range, but there are resources available. I would put this just-in-time training as one of those resources. Other good sources of information, the Pavement Preservation and Recycling Alliance website, roadresource.org, is a great source of information that the asphalt-based treatment industry, EMA, ISSA, and ERA have put together. Just a wealth of information there. The FHWA has just published their preservation checklists, and this information is available online. And the Slurry Surfacing Association has web-based training on slurries, microsurfacing, chip seals, and crack treatments. That's also available for free online. There are a lot of other resources as well. The TC3 training that most state agencies have access to. The National Center has classes that they offer, and the National Highway Institute as well. That brings me to the end. Time for one question. Judy.
My question is, does your just-in-time training include some concepts or things that inspectors should look for when inspecting the job?
Yes, there is that content. It's not broken out as, inspector checklist or what could possibly go wrong or something like that, but it is in there. And, I also think that some of that, an agency might say, what to look for microsurfacing, what to look for chip seal, what to look for crack sealing. We did have a module in the introductory content that looks at when is it too, I want to say when is it too late, but sort of after you do preservation, what should you be looking at? When is it done? So that's some new content that we know is important, but we really didn't see anything else like it out there.
Great, thank you, David.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.